Who would have thought that the beloved children's author of the Soviet Union, the author of touching stories about Lenin, had been hiding her heroic past for decades? Zoya Voskresenskaya, whose books were published in millions of copies, was in fact one of the key figures in Soviet intelligence, obtaining secrets from the Third Reich. Her operational pseudonym, Little Red Riding Hood, is a beautiful legend that appeared only in journalism. But her real work under the cover of Madame Yartseva, Berlin, turned out to be much more dangerous and significant. Her story does not begin with the glamour of spy novels, but rather with the silence of library halls and the hum of correctional institutions. Young Zoya Voskresenskaya, born in 1907, began her service not in secret offices, but in a completely different environment. She was a librarian in a battalion of troops of the All-Russian Extraordinary Commission for Combating Counter-Revolution and Sabotage, the very same Cheka that stood guard over order in the young Soviet state. Instead of studying reports and ciphers, her days were spent among bookshelves, where centuries of dust mingled with the smell of fresh printing ink. She organized the volumes, issued literature, and kept records, work that required diligence and attention to detail, qualities that would later prove invaluable in her true mission. After that, Zoya Ivanovna worked as a political instructor in a colony for juvenile offenders. Here, among difficult teenagers, she learned not only to read characters, but also to influence them, understand their motives, and distinguish truth from lies, skills that are indispensable for anyone who works with people, and even more so for those who are called upon to uncover their secrets. It was a real university of life, where every day taught lessons in human psychology. The turning point came in 1929. At that time, when the country was just beginning its path to industrialization and new personnel were needed, Zoya Voskresenskaya was recruited to the Foreign Department of the United States Political Administration, OGPU. Her first serious assignment took her to distant Harbin, a city that in those years was a melting pot of Russian emigrants, Japanese military personnel, and Chinese merchants. Under the cover of a modest position as secretary of an oil syndicate, she carried out a delicate mission, returning employees who had fled with government funds to the USSR. It was not a chase with shooting, but subtle psychological work that required persuasion, cunning, and knowledge of human weaknesses. Voskresenskaya's further path lay through European countries, where she honed her skills. In Latvia, Austria, and Finland, she coordinated the activities of illegal agents, people working deep underground, often with no visible connection to the Soviet representation. Her task was not only to support them, but also to recruit new, valuable sources of information. Among such sources was, for example, the wife of a Japanese diplomat, seemingly an ordinary woman from high society, but her position gave her access to important information. Zoya Ivanovna knew how to approach people and build trusting relationships, hiding her sharp analytical mind behind a polite exterior. Before the start of the Soviet-Finnish War in the late 1930s, her work in Finland took on special significance. She collected strategic data on the Finnish army, fortifications, and plans, information that was vital to the Soviet command. It was then, by systematizing vast amounts of scattered information, that Voskresenskaya effectively laid the foundations for the future Analytical Intelligence Department. She did not just collect facts, but also learn to interpret them, anticipate developments, and make predictions, a quality that would later become her trademark. By 1940, Zoya Voskresenskaya was already an experienced intelligence officer, ready for the most important mission. She was sent to Berlin, the heart of the Third Reich, a city where the spirit of the coming war was in the air. There, she operated under the name Madame Yartseva, using her role as the wife of Soviet resident Boris Rybkin, her future husband, as a cover. Madame Yartseva's days were filled with social gatherings, diplomatic receptions, and visits. She moved in the highest circles, among diplomats, aristocrats, and influential officials of Nazi Germany. It was a complex and dangerous game, where every word and every gesture mattered. She assessed the mood of the Nazi elite, looking for the slightest signs of impending aggression, picking up on the subtlest nuances of political and military plans. It was like reading faces, where every wrinkle, every change in the expression of the eyes could tell more than hundreds of official reports. Her main achievement in Berlin was her curatorship of Willy Lehmann, known in intelligence circles as Agent Breitenbach. Lehmann was not just an informant, but a high-ranking officer of the Gestapo, the secret state police, one of the most sinister organizations of the time. He was an incredibly valuable source, located right in the enemy's lair. Voskresenskaya received vital information from Lehmann about the structure of the German secret services, their methods of operation, their plans, and most importantly, Germany's military preparations. He passed on information about troop numbers, new types of weapons, and the deployment of units. Information equivalent in importance to strategic maps that could change the course of the future war. In addition, information also flowed through Voskresenskaya from another, equally important anti-fascist group, the Red Chapel. This was an entire resistance network consisting of Germans who refused to accept the Nazi regime. Their reports, together with Lehmann's data, created a complete picture of what was happening in the Third Reich. Zoya Ivanovna did not simply collect this information. Her analytical department, established in Berlin and recognized as exemplary, systematized all the information received. It was a colossal task, separating the wheat from the chaff, verifying facts, comparing data from different sources, identifying trends, and drawing conclusions. The results of this work, in the form of analytical notes and reports, were submitted to the top leadership of the USSR, including Joseph Stalin. This information was invaluable for understanding the true intentions of Nazi Germany and preparing for the coming conflict. Thus, in pre-war Berlin, amidst the glamour of diplomatic receptions and the ominous shadow of the Gestapo, an information base was being formed that would later play a role in the Great Patriotic War. And Zoya Voskresenskaya, Madame Yartseva, was one of the key links in this complex and dangerous chain. The spring of 1941 in Berlin was particularly tense. The air seemed to be electrified with an expectation that could not be touched, but which could be felt in every glance, in every gesture. At the Soviet embassy, behind walls where diplomatic routine had reigned supreme just yesterday, Zoya Voskresenskaya's department was working flat out. Based on information received from Agent Breitenbach and other sources, Voskresenskaya's analysts were meticulously piecing together the fragments of the mosaic. As a high-ranking Gestapo officer, Lehmann had access to information that seemed incredible to many. His reports, together with messages from the Red Chapel, clearly pointed to one thing: Germany was preparing to attack the Soviet Union. In those days, when the world was still clinging to a fragile truce, Voskresenskaya's department sent a report to Moscow in which the date of the coming catastrophe was indicated with striking accuracy: 22 June. This was not a guess or a supposition, but the result of painstaking analysis, confirmed by data from the heart of enemy intelligence. However, as often happens in history, the voice of truth was drowned out and ignored. The country's leadership, preoccupied with its internal affairs and perhaps unwilling to believe that war would break out so soon, dismissed the warning. Perhaps they considered it disinformation, provocation, or simply failed to grasp the scale of the impending threat. The price of this decision turned out to be monstrous. When the first bombs fell on Soviet cities and Nazi troops crossed the border, a new chapter began for Zoya Voskresenskaya, a chapter full of despair and determination. She was recalled from Berlin and entrusted with one of the most responsible and dangerous tasks: to head the special group of the People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs, NKVD, under the legendary Pavel Sudoplatov. The task was to create an effective resistance behind enemy lines. In those days, when millions of people were gripped by fear and confusion, Voskresenskaya was busy selecting and training saboteurs. She did not just supervise, she delved into every detail, understanding that the lives of hundreds, even thousands, depended on the training of each person. Voskresenskaya taught them not only how to handle explosives and weapons, but also how to think like scouts, survive in inhumane conditions and remain calm in the face of danger. She became one of the true creators of the partisan movement, the popular resistance that would later inflict enormous damage on the enemy. Her work was the foundation on which the invisible but deadly war in the rear was based. If Moscow had fallen, Zoya Voskresenskaya was ready to remain in the occupied city. She already had a legend, carefully thought out to the smallest detail. She was to become an ordinary railway worker. It was a plan that required incredible courage and a willingness to sacrifice oneself, because working underground in the occupied capital was tantamount to a death sentence. But she was ready for it, as she was for everything her homeland demanded of her. Later, when the front stabilized and the war entered its protracted phase, Zoya Voskresenskaya was sent to neutral Sweden. Here, in Stockholm, far from the din of battle, she once again headed the agent network. It was delicate, precision work that required diplomatic skill and operational acumen. The most important communication channels passed through Sweden, and her agents gathered valuable information about German troops, their movements, and supplies. The data obtained by this network was so accurate and timely that it helped in the planning of major military operations, such as the counteroffensive at Stalingrad. She also played a key role in facilitating the negotiations that led to Finland's withdrawal from its alliance with Germany in 1944. This was a diplomatic triumph that significantly weakened the position of the Nazi bloc and shortened the front line for the Red Army. Her negotiating skills, analytical mind, and ability to think several steps ahead made this strategically important result possible. The great victory came, bringing long-awaited peace. But for many heroes of this war, it did not mean well-deserved rest and recognition. In 1945, when intelligence colonel Zoya Voskresenskaya, a woman who had devoted the best years of her life to serving her country, was dismissed from the security services. The reasons for this decision were complex and are still controversial. It is known that she had conflicts with the leadership, caused by her principled assessments and straightforwardness. She was not afraid to express her opinion, even if it ran counter to the position of her superiors. In the post-war period, when the power structure was being consolidated and any manifestation of independent thinking could be regarded as disloyalty, such a position could not go unnoticed. It was a time when even distinguished people could fall into disfavor for the most insignificant reasons, like leaves blown away by the autumn wind. However, Zoya Voskresenskaya, possessing an unyielding character, found the strength to start a new life, discovering a new calling that was completely unexpected for someone in her profession. She became a children's writer. The name Zoya Voskresenskaya appeared on the covers of books read by millions of Soviet children. Her stories, especially the series about Lenin, such as A Mother's Heart, were published in huge print runs. These books were filled with warmth, kindness, and faith in a bright future, instilling the best qualities in children. But until the end of the 1980s, for more than 40 years, none of her readers, fellow writers, or even close acquaintances knew about her past. She led a double life. By day, she was a famous writer whose works were in every home. By night, she was a woman who kept the secrets of the big game, spy operations, and risky missions. It was like living in two worlds at once, not allowing one to seep into the other, maintaining an unbreakable wall between the past and the present. The truth about Zoya Voskresenskaya was only revealed shortly before her death in the late 1980s. Only then did the world learn about a woman whose analytical genius and operational acumen not only yielded valuable information, but also, as is now clear, saved thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives, by preventing disasters and assisting in crucial military operations. Her legacy is not only the books loved by many generations, but also the intelligence personnel she trained, people who continued her work, working throughout Europe and protecting the interests of their country. Today, with the archives now open, we can finally pay tribute to this remarkable woman whose dedication to her country and professionalism became legendary in the world of intelligence. Behind the pages of children's books lay the heart of a true warrior.